Hello viewers, I am Amrendra Narayan from the Department of Physics, Patna University. I welcome you to my talk in this webinar, which has been organized by Space Education Research Foundation, Ahmedabad. The topic of my talk is Metacognitive Skills for Physics. That is, learning how to learn physics. In today's education scenario, the marks that you obtain in examination have acquired an out of proportion importance. They have become so important that they have taken the place of actual learning, which has apparently become irrelevant as long as you are fetching high marks or good grades. This is mainly because of the high competitive job market, where the marks or grades that you have obtained have become an important criterion for selection. Better marks or grades lead to better choice in profession. The competitive examinations have occupied a larger than life place in our society, and the whole educational environment is geared towards competition. But there is another aspect. Physics is such a beautiful subject. Learning physics for its own sake is both challenging and rewarding. The marks that you get in examination should be an outcome of your learning and not the goal of learning. This is what I feel. This talk is about how to become a better learner. For teachers, it is also about how to help our students become better learners. In this talk, I will discuss about developing strategies and skills for improving your true learning capability. In this lecture, I want to talk about metacognitive skills. What is metacognition? Metacognition refers to the process of reflecting on and directing one's own thinking. What are metacognitive skills? Human knowledge is expanding at a tremendous rate today. Knowledge of all types is freely available today on the World Wide Web. In this age of knowledge, the skill of learning efficiently is becoming increasingly important. Metacognitive skills are those skills through which you examine your own learning process and make adjustments to make it more effective. So, this talk is about how to become a better learner through applying these principles. For teachers, this talk is also about how to help the students become better learners. The next topic is how students' prior knowledge affects their learning. What is prior knowledge? It includes knowledge and skills that the student has already learned and which lies at the base of the topics that the student is currently studying. The background foundation in language, mathematics, and the subject basics, these are part of prior knowledge. An inadequate foundation leads to poor learning. If the student's prior knowledge has gaps or if it is insufficient, then it may not support new knowledge. It will only make learning difficult and incomplete. If whatever you have learned so far, that is, prior knowledge, is applied in the wrong context, it may lead students to make faulty assumptions or draw inappropriate parallels. One thing that I have come to see from my own experience, inaccurate prior knowledge is surprisingly difficult to correct. It can both distort students' understanding and interfere with incoming information. What should we do? A student studies several topics in a subject. Every study topic has some prerequisites because its knowledge content is built upon so many things. They may be explicit or implicit, but in order to understand that particular topic, the student must first be well versed in these prerequisites. The prerequisites for most physics topics include some specific mathematical tools and physics topics studied in earlier classes. Besides these, a certain level of proficiency in language is required. Otherwise, it will be difficult to correctly interpret whatever the student studies. So, my suggestion is that out of your study time, you should keep aside some time daily for revision of topics studied in earlier classes. Make sure to find out and straighten any conceptual gaps. This is something that should be made habitual. Do it daily. On some days you may find that you do not have time. You can still spare 5 minutes at least. This will maintain continuity and help in habit formation. The important thing is regularity. Fluency in mathematics is also very important. Keep aside some time every day to study, understand, and practice the use of relevant mathematical tools. Find out and fill in the gaps in your prior knowledge. This is an important step towards better understanding of any topic. Another important thing is that the knowledge should be organized. How does the way students organize knowledge affect their learning? It is not just what you know, but also how you organize what you know that influences learning and performance. First of all, let us see what is meant by organization of knowledge. You might have noticed that for some topics, your knowledge appears as a vague jumble of disjoint informations. This is unorganized knowledge. On the other hand, organized knowledge consists of a well-defined set of explicitly interconnected facts. In fact, knowledge organizations that include more interconnections and that are based on deep and meaningful features are more effective in supporting learning and performance. Organized knowledge can often be represented by semantic nets, in which the nodes represent the different components which are meaningfully related through linking ideas. Look at the diagram. It is a concept chart that represents a simple semantic network. The central theme is grass snakes. Then there are different related aspects. These snakes are vegetarians, they slither, and so on. In a concept map, the concepts are shown in bubbles or boxes, and the interrelations are labeled connectors or arrows. The concepts plus connectors, each combination makes full sentences. Such charts are called concept maps. Thus, it is not just what you know, but also how you organize knowledge that influences your learning and performance. Organized knowledge that includes more interconnections and that are based on deep and meaningful relational features tend to be more effective in supporting learning and performance. Effective knowledge organizations are well matched to the tasks at hand. Thus, rich and meaningful knowledge organizations are very helpful in terms of conceptual grasp and applicability. In the next slide, I will show a concept map related to physics. This is, as I said, one of the ways of organizing knowledge. This slide shows a concept map in which a comparison has been made between electricity related concepts and magnetism related concepts. Just observe how the different conceptual ideas have been interconnected. So, there are two central concepts, electric field and magnetic field. Notice how different ideas are represented by linking pairs of concepts. For example, magnet, then movement produces electric field. Similarly, magnet produces magnetic field. Magnets have two poles. Two poles which are North Pole and South Pole. Two poles always occur in pairs, and so on. Such a concept map depicts a lot of facts in a single picture. It also shows how these concepts are interconnected. So concept maps are very useful for organizing knowledge. But there are also several other ways for organizing knowledge, which I will not talk about now, and there are ways of representing organized knowledge also. Many students, especially ones who are new to a discipline, tend to have knowledge organizations that are sparsely interconnected and that are based on superficial features. For example, just classification. For such students, I suggest that if they get such textbooks that can benefit them, or such instructions that help them to see important relationships and build more connections among the pieces of knowledge they are learning, it will lead them to see important relationships and develop more flexible and effective knowledge organizations. In this connection, my experience is that one should always use the best textbooks because these provide enough background information for developing the necessary insights. Another thing is, of course, that good teachers or great teachers make a lot of difference in the understanding of the students due to their rich experience. Today, almost all information that you need for understanding the topic is available on the World Wide Web. But you still need teachers to discern the facts and provide the right perspective. As far as possible, every student should get in contact and be in contact with such persons who understand the subject well and can act as a troubleshooter and mentor for them. The next thing that I want to talk about is motivation. What are the factors that motivate students to learn? Motivation is a tricky issue. It refers to the personal drive that an individual has in reaching a desired state or producing a desired outcome. So, one who is motivated to study will, by his own initiative, try to spend as much time and effort as he can on his study. Whenever a person is motivated, doing that work becomes easy. In the context of learning, Motivation influences the direction, intensity, persistence and quality of the learning in which the students engage. Motivation in general generates, directs and sustains what the students do in order to learn. What are the factors that motivate students to learn? There are two important concepts that are central to understanding motivation. The first one is the subjective value of a goal. Suppose you choose a goal. You will be motivated towards it if your own personal feeling is that you should be motivated. How valuable is it for you? It is your own personal feeling that is important. The second point is, what do you expect to gain from it? What are the expectancies or the expectations for successful attainment of that goal? Not only that, whether you will be achieving it or not. How strong is your expectation regarding that? This also matters. Here is a picture that depicts typical scenario of today. If a teacher wants to teach concepts of physics to his students, then apparently there are very few or even no takers. On the other hand, if there is another teacher who teaches the tricks and techniques of getting higher marks in specific examinations, then students usually flock around him. That is why teachers who genuinely want their students to learn the intricacies of their subject often get discouraged, seeing the general mood of their students. Well, one must recognize that the goals that students set for themselves can differ from the teacher's perception regarding the kind of comprehension that they would prefer for their students. Students are more worried about external performance indicators. 80%, 85%, 90%, 95% and so on. Learning appears secondary. In fact, for many the intricacies of the subject are too bothersome if they do not lead to tangible examination performance. Nevertheless, it is goals that set the direction to the motivated behavior. It is the learning of concepts that leads to true performance. Now, the way these two types of students study are different. Even though they are very few in numbers, there are such students who are genuinely interested in their subject and prefer to aim at learning goals instead of performance goals, as indicated by external performance indicators. Students who prefer learning goals are more likely to use such study strategies that result in deeper understanding. They seek help where needed, persist when faced with difficulty, and seek out and feel comfortable with challenging tasks. Even though students' goals may not correspond exactly to the goals of their teachers, these two sets of goals do not always conflict. In fact, when some of their goals get aligned with their teachers' goals, powerful learning situations tend to result and very good learning takes place. And this is what we desire. Let us talk about the subjective value of a goal. The importance of a goal is often referred to as its subjective value. It is one of the key features that influence the motivation to pursue that goal. There are three broad categories of subjective value for activities and goals related to achievement. The first category is attainment value. It represents the satisfaction that one gains from mastery and accomplishment of a goal or task. The second category is intrinsic value. It represents the satisfaction that one gains simply from doing that task. And the third category is instrumental value. It represents the degree to which an activity or goal helps one accomplish other important goals, including extrinsic rewards. What about expectancies? The value or importance that a particular goal holds for a person may not be sufficient for motivating the person to attain that goal. The belief that he will be able to successfully attain that goal or obtain that particular outcome is also required. There are two forms of expectancies. One is outcome expectancy. The outcome expectancies are based on the belief that specific actions will bring about a desired outcome. The second one is efficacy expectancy. The word efficacy means the ability to produce a desired result or outcome. So expectancy based on efficacy consists of the belief that one is capable of identifying, organizing, initiating and executing a course of action that will bring about a desired outcome. What determines a student's expectation for success? One important influence is prior experience in similar contexts. If the student has experienced success in a particular kind of activity in the past, then he or she is more likely to expect success in a similar activity in the future. If he or she has experienced failure in the past, then he or she is more likely to expect failure in the future. Thus, the self-concept of the student is the determining factor as to how much the student expects to succeed. Another aspect is how the student views the environment around him, whether it is supportive for his goal or not. If students perceive the environment as supportive, for example, if the teacher is approachable and the classmates are also willing to help, such support enhances the motivation. If the environment is unsupportive, if the teacher is hostile, the expectation for success goes down and the motivation gets eroded. There are several factors that influence the motivation of the students. This diagram depicts some of the important factors. The student's environment can be supportive or non-supportive. The learning goal can be relevant or irrelevant in the eyes of the student. And thirdly, the efficacy, the student's ability to produce desired and outcome can be high or low. Sustained motivation depends on all these factors. The student remains motivated only if the goal is relevant, the environment is supportive, and the student's efficacy is high. Otherwise, one or more of these factors takes over. But if the goal is sufficiently relevant and the student's efficacy is high and the student really wants to perform, then even if the environment is hostile to an extent, it does not matter, and the student still succeeds. How do students develop mastery? Earlier I had talked about the importance of background knowledge. In a similar way, there are background skills which are crucial for proper comprehension and concept formation. For example, take a school student. If he has not mastered multiplication tables, then every time he needs to perform a multiplication or division, he will find it extremely difficult and cumbersome, and he is likely to make many mistakes also. But once he has made the required effort and mastered the multiplication tables, then multiplication and division will become easy for him. Practice with the multiplication tables is a component skill for doing any multiplication or division. So, in order to develop mastery, the student must recognize the right set of component skills and acquire these skills. One should practice combining and integrating these components to develop greater fluency and automaticity, and understand the conditions and contexts in which they can apply what they have learned. Component skills may be difficult and time consuming to learn, especially at a late stage, but they are important because without them learning gets greatly hampered. Often during the teaching-learning process, we find a component skill, a communication gap, between the teacher and the learner. One important reason for this communication gap is that the teacher is generally an expert of that field who has had a lot of practice in its component skills. Tasks that seem straightforward to the teacher often involve a complex combination of many skills, many of which the student has not yet learned. So, a communication gap develops between the teacher and the learner. The figure depicts 4 stages in the journey towards mastery. Initially, there are lots of gaps in the background, prerequisite knowledge and skills, many of which the student is not even aware of. The student does not know what he lacks. This has been called unconscious incompetence. Gradually, as he acquires more experience and knowledge, he begins to recognize the areas he is lacking in. This stage has been called conscious incompetence. Now that the student is aware of the gaps, he begins working on them and removing them. This stage has been called conscious competence. With further practice, the background skills and gradually become involuntary. He is now able to concentrate on the main matter without any conscious thought on the background skills. This is the final stage of mastery and has been shown as unconscious competence in the diagram. So when a teacher who is at this level of expertise tries to explain some concept to a novice, he might be leaving out many bits of information that is necessary for a novice to gain an understanding. As a result, he is not able to satisfy the student. Moreover, he is not able to comprehend why the student is unable to understand such simple things. The reason, of course, is that the teacher has forgotten many of the stages that he himself once went through before gaining mastery. What approach should you take as a student? This is what you should do. You should identify and then reinforce those component skills that you are weak in through specific targeted practice. Whenever you find that you are unable to do some task properly, then if you look around, you will find that there are some component skills missing or inadequately learned. When that component skill is practiced, then you will notice that your performance on the overall task often improves significantly. First, practice a component skill in isolation. It will allow you to focus your attention solely on that skill. Then practice the whole task to see how the parts fit into the whole in a context that is authentically complex. If the task is highly complex and can be divided into component parts, it is better if the components are practiced temporarily in isolation and then progressively combined. This is the strategy that the student should adopt. Now I will talk about the key features that lead to effective practice. The kind of feedback and practice that enhance learning. Often the parents or teachers advise their students, practice more mathematics. This works for some students, but it does not work for all students. Either it is difficult and remains difficult, or it is easy and practice appears redundant. If you desire to make your practice more effective, you will first need to move beyond the simple maxims such as practice makes perfect or the more feedback the better. The key features of effective practice include the following. First, focusing on a specific goal or criterion for performance. Sometimes the student does not know what to focus on. Then he browses from one place to another aimlessly. Second, setting target at an appropriate level of challenge relative to your current performance. The challenge should not be too much and it should not be too small or too easy. And thirdly, to practice in sufficient amount and with sufficient frequency so that you get enough time to develop skills and knowledge. What is feedback? Feedback consists of looking at your outcome and adjusting your methods or path. Feedback is important. The key features of effective feedback thus are as following. Feedback is effective when it communicates to students where they are relative to the stated goals and what they need to do to improve. Feedback is effective when it provides this information to students when they can make the most use of. Practice and feedback can work together in such a way that student continues to work towards a focused goal and incorporates feedback received in a way that promotes further development towards the goal. When I talk about metacognitive skills, I am talking about those skills that help in better understanding and better learning. Now, who is a self-directed learner? Most of the students simply learn whatever is taught. This is because they have not developed their insight to an extent that they are able to frame questions through which they can explore the subject further. A self-directed learner asks questions and then tries to find out their answers. In a way, he directs his own thought process towards a deeper and more complete concept building. When one is in school, one does not feel the need for the self-directed learning. Only when one goes to college and finds that he is on his own, that the need for self-directed learning is felt. Self-directed learning describes a process by which individuals take the initiative with or without the help of others, in diagnosing their learning needs, formulating learning goals, identifying human and material resources for learning, choosing and implementing appropriate learning strategies, and evaluating learning outcomes. The process of reflecting on and directing one's own thinking, as we have discussed earlier, is called metacognition. It is somewhat unfortunate that although metacognitive skills are important for everyone, students are not taught how to develop these skills, and consequently this aspect remains neglected in students. Those students who habitually have better learning styles perform well, while other students who possess inefficient learning styles remain mediocre without realizing why. So, helping students to improve their metacognitive skills can hold enormous benefits. The benefits include not only intellectual habits that are valuable across disciplines, such as planning one's approach to a large project, considering alternatives, and evaluating one's own perspective, but also more flexible and usable discipline-specific knowledge. We need to motivate our students so that they become self-directed learners. There are various models to describe how learners would ideally apply metacognitive skills to learn and perform well. The process of monitoring and controlling mutually affect each other. So, these models often take the form of a feedback cycle. The diagram here shows a feedback loop. This feedback loop represents self-directed learning. The stages are described in the next slide. Self-directed learning cycle. The feedback process representing a self-directed learning cycle typically consists of the following components. First, assessing the task at hand, taking into consideration the task's goals and constraints. Second, evaluating one's own knowledge and skills, identifying their strengths, and weaknesses. Third, planning the approach in a way that accounts for the current situation. Fourth, applying various strategies to enact the plan while monitoring the progress along the way. And fifth, reflecting on the degree to which the current approach is working so that one can adjust and restart the cycle as needed. Assessing the task at hand. The first phase of metacognition, assessing the task, is not always a natural or easy one for students. It may not be sufficient simply to remind students to read the assignment carefully. In fact, students may need to learn how to assess the task. Practice incorporating this step into their planning before it will become a habit. And receive feedback on the accuracy of the task assessment before they begin working on a given task. Evaluating one's own strengths and weaknesses. People in general have great difficulty recognizing their own strengths and weaknesses, and students appear to be especially poor judges of their own knowledge and skills. This tendency, especially among novices, to inaccurately assess one's knowledge and skill relative to a particular goal is particularly troubling because it has serious consequences for one's ability to achieve that goal. A student who inaccurately assesses his or her skills for a particular task might seriously underestimate the time it will take to effectively complete the given assignment, or the additional help and resources that will have to be acquired. Planning an appropriate approach. There are two ways students' planning can go wrong. Students tend to spend too little time planning, especially when compared to more expert individuals. Planning one's approach to a task can increase the chances of success, but students tend not to recognize the need for it. When students do engage in planning, they often make plans that are not well matched to the task at hand. Applying strategies and monitoring performance. Once students have a plan and begin to apply strategies that implement their plan, they need to monitor their performance. They need to ask themselves, is this strategy working, or would another one be more productive? Students who monitor their own progress and try to explain to themselves what they are learning along the way generally show greater learning gains as compared to students who engage less often in self-monitoring and self-explanation activities. Reflecting on and adjusting one's approach. Even when students monitor their performance and identify failures or shortcomings in their approach, there is no guarantee that they will try more effective alternatives. They may resist changing their current method, or they may lack alternative strategies. Good problem solvers try out new strategies if their current strategy is not working, whereas poor problem solvers continue using old strategies even after it has failed. Busy or procrastination-prone students may be unwilling to investigate in making a change. Students tend not to adopt newly learned strategies unless the perceived benefits clearly outweigh the perceived cost of their effort and time. Beliefs about intelligence and learning. The students' beliefs about their own abilities, shortcomings, and their special talents can have a pervasive influence on metacognitive processes. Their belief about intelligence and learning, whether students view learning as fast and easy or slow and difficult, and whether they perceive intelligence as fixed or malleable, all these influence their metacognitive processes. A student who has negative beliefs about his or her abilities in particular contexts, for example, I am no good at math, may feel defeated from the outset and consequently not bother to plan or implement effortful strategies because of the belief that any time and effort spent will do little good. What are the implications? Most of the students do not even realize that there is something called metacognitive skills. Students need the support of their teachers for learning, refining, and effectively applying basic metacognitive skills. To address these needs, it becomes the duty of teachers and instructors to make the students aware of the advantages that these skills can offer to them in the long run, and also make the development of metacognitive skills of the students a part of the course goals. I would like to give some suggestions to physics teachers regarding incorporating metacognitive skills in their own teaching. The first point is about assessing the task at hand. The more explicit you are, the better you are able to assess that task. So you have to be more explicit than what you may think necessary. When addressing your students, you should clearly tell them what are your expectations, and especially what you as a teacher do not want from them and what they should not come up with. Then you should check students' understanding of the task. An important thing is that the teacher should provide performance criteria with the assignment. Evaluating one's own strengths and weaknesses. The teacher should assess his students and give them performance-based assessments. For this assessment to be useful, it should be shared with students at an early stage. The teacher should encourage the students to do self-assessment. Rather, he should provide opportunities to them for practicing self-assessment. Planning an appropriate approach. The students should learn how to create and implement their own specific plan for improvement. So the teacher should first provide the students with a plan of action and then make them implement this plan. Next, he should have the students create their own plan of action and implement them so that they may get some practice on how to approach a subject. Applying strategies and monitoring performance. The teacher should provide simple heuristics for self-correction. Heuristic means learning through discovery, so the student should not be spoon-fed. The student should also do guided self-assessments and reflect on how to do their work. Finally, the student should also be taught to use peer review and obtain reader response for specific questions. Reflecting on and adjusting one's approach. Finally, the student will need to adjust their approach based on their experiences. So the teacher should provide activities that require students to reflect on their performances and remind the students and prompt them to analyze the effectiveness of their study skills. Different students use different strategies, so the teacher should present multiple strategies. The teacher should create assignments that focus on strategizing rather than implementation. So assignments should be such that they should help the students master the techniques of study. Beliefs about intelligence and learning. The self-concept of any person is at the root of all performances. So the teacher should directly address the beliefs of students about themselves and about learning. The teacher should try to broaden the students' understanding of the learning process. Another thing is that to help the students set realistic expectations, not too much and not too little. There are some other general strategies to promote metacognition. These are making the students model their own metacognitive processes and scaffolding students in their metacognitive processes. Conclusion. Towards the end of this talk, I would like to make an appeal to the designers of education policy of India. We Indians are fond of envisioning India as Vishwaguru. To actualize such vision, we need to prepare ourselves for a culture of academic excellence. Our society today is knowledge-driven society. So far, our education system has not seriously catered to the development of learning ability. But research in cognitive sciences have made this possible. Why not have this as part of regular curriculum? This will require many dedicated teachers, of course. It will make a substantial difference to the quality of education in our country. So why not we make a start? And my appeal to physics teachers: let us actuate a vibrant new generation of able physicists by inculcating in them the habit of monitoring their own learning processes and shaping it. We can do it. We should do it. Let us do it. Finally, I want to thank you all. This talk is based mainly on the contents of the excellent book, How Learning Works. I give my hearty thanks to the authors, Susan Ambrose, Michael Bridges, Michael DiPetro, and Marsha Lovett, and Mary Normal, for whatever they have taught me through their book, which is published by Josie Bass. And finally, I am grateful to you all for letting me share this idea. And my final wish is, let us all join our efforts and make our beloved India the Vishwaguru again. Thank you all. Thanks.